good stuff or my selection. I'm going to release all the stuff. I want to release, Willie McTell. So I'm going to do Willie McTell, the complete recorded works. And what he calls his collections are the complete recorded works. It's real straightforward. The complete recorded works in chronological order and he's got a million artists. I don't know how many of these things he sells, but you can find them on CD. Blind Willie McTell, the complete recorded works in chronological order, Volume 1, 1926.
Did you meet that woman at conference, Mary Catherine Alden?
I did meet her.
Because Vanguard, as far as they're concerned, and those reissues that she's doing, all she has to do is to sell 5,000. Which in the world
I think that's
utterly...
I would think it's tough. I mean, in a world of millions, it's
going to work.
Like with the Collins doing, he's predicting he'll sell
2,000 or something. He's doing a political project, talking about it.
should be at 2,000.
But in any event, I guess I get into that by saying it seems to me, as somebody who just reads about what's out there for my own enjoyment, that there's a lot of stuff coming out on CD. I'm sure there's a whole lot more that's not, but there's these guys like...
Beware, it's an issue. I don't have any answers.
Great Bear or Johnny Parth. I think it's Great Bear.
It is Great Bear, the German company.
Who knows? In 10 years, everyone can have a CD. Period. Flat out, everyone's got a CD. And then there's the same kind of market that there was for LPs.
How did you guys start performing separately and then together? Anybody jump in there?
Roy touched on it to an extent with the Kingston Trio. My father had me singing when I was 7 or 8 in front of people. He wanted the support, I'm sure, on stage, and he wanted us to be able to sing in front of people. It was never an issue. I think of it as like families who draw, so their kids always are drawing because people draw. It must be easy and second nature. Nobody in my family ever drew, and as I say, the only thing I can do is MiG-21s and destroy battleships from 4th grade, dead Civil War soldiers on the field. That's the only thing I can draw, a little stick figure. But singing, we always did, and it's second nature to me.
That came out of a discussion about what it is, little boys and little girls, and what are our interests as little boys? Well, it's dead soldiers, it's cars, sinking ships.
Dog fights in the
Um,
We're laughing because we,
Trying to deal with it.
No, it's just a whole, because it's interesting having a kid.
We had this discussion with some friends on Sunday
Who?
said to us, they don't have kids, but they said, I think there are gender differences that are inbred because
it's something that you try not to,
because our 2-year-old was out in her backyard reaching for the top of the fence that we have there, and all little girls that come over don't do that. It's just it's like Jesus Christ is going to get over the fence in another week.
He sticks to the fence. He's scaling it. And then if we're watching little girls that come over to visit and they don't do that, or he'll get a branch in his hand.
They said,
and he'll go,
tea party.
yeah, he'll get a branch in his hand, and having never seen a gun, will aim it to shoot at us. And we get, how did he learn that?
Pretty strange, huh?
Oh, he also he'll walk along and he'll say, a stick, you want a stick? Have a stick, he'll just carry his stick. I've never seen a little girl when he was a little girl.
I don't know, so that's a whole...
Or a rock, I got a rock. I got a rock.
We're dealing with that right now.
Dog park.
Yeah, so we're dealing with that.
So anyway, go ahead.
So I
You were
was
telling me the
16 and
story.
Tom Dooley hit, and I was already singing sort of and taking guitar lessons, and found out that it was a popular thing to do, and it spurred me on to learn more songs. I had a different repertoire than a lot of people, and it went on from there. When I was in the Navy, I wasn't a very good officer. I was a supply corps officer, and the only thing that I could do that my executive officer liked was target practice and play the guitar. He really thought that was great. And he had me out there performing on the fantail at sea for the rest of the sailors on the
What
ship.
kind of target practice?
I had the handguns. We used to take it from sea. I've always been a good shot, something you didn't know about me.
What did you aim at?
Things,
Seagulls?
ballast stuff we threw out there, not seagulls. Porpoises, whales, anything we could find. As long as it was living and moving. That's another phase of my life.
See, you've traveled with him all this time. You didn't know that about him.
So there was constant encouragement at that time, in the 60s, got out, I had no intention of doing this professionally. I went to work for Doubleday.
Getting out is when?
67. I got out of the Navy in 67, and I went to work for Doubleday. But this Pinewoods camp changed my life, because the person that my father had hired to teach guitar ran a guitar school on Long Island. And he asked me to leave Doubleday and my little program I was working with to help him run the school. And I decided to do it. 2 years later, I asked Jeff
what you were doing.
I was working for the Literary Guild as a reader, and they had me as editor of the Military Book Club.
Reading books about sinking ships.
Sinking
Dead
ships
people.
and Civil War soldiers. I was really happy. So I did in '69, and in '71 I asked Jeff to come and teach with me. And in '72 we performed with my brother in a community church because they needed some music, and we provided it. I was already running Tuesday night sings every night for the community, people singing so we could sing together.
You were teaching guitar and songs,
That's right.
basically.
Yeah.
And you were doing the same thing. teaching
And
banjo.
And it went on from there. The bicentennial gave us a big boost. We were needed in schools and in community places to talk about Americana.
Mhm.
And it led to more and more schools. And also, we were getting tired of the politics of the school. And we decided to leave just about the time that we were at the peak of where we were getting work. We also had 3 cities out of which to work, because my brother was in Boston and my girlfriend was in Washington and we lived in New York. We could work in all 3 cities. For a long time that continued until our linkage to New York was dropped.
But Jeff had a history in his family of someone being up on stage performing for people, and nothing did not. So much odder that I'd be doing now what I'm doing.
In a sense, the commercial folk revival.
Thank you.
it
You're
was-
absolutely right.
It was irrelevant to what
No,
you
I was
did.
going to say that in some ways, if I'm doing anything that's important, I was brought in by the commercial folk revival. It made me more of a performer than I probably would have been otherwise. Now, granted, I have all this background, and I could
Sure.
change over the years until I let go of all that contemporary stuff and just looked at the roots materials. But who knows, if it hadn't been for the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul, and Mary and the flush of excitement about acoustic music going on, I might not have been there at all. But that's not what you meant, so I'll take it back and let
Well-
you say your statement again.
Well, I mean, I half of it, my statement was wrong, but half of it is it's half true. When I said, in a sense, it's irrelevant to what you ended up doing, and that your family situation is much more directly relevant to what you ended up
Yeah,
doing.
there's that
Can't
continuum.
be-
I had a little blip here,
Yeah.
where I went over the top and I was doing contemporary things, but that ran along. The thread that runs through it is what I've ended up doing.
Was your family surprised that you chose this path?
Yeah, how did you
were-
end up?
Shocked.
What
What
was
was
your, what
your
did you go to school, when you went to
background
school and
and-
stuff, what were you going to do? What was your-
My senior thesis in college was on Russian history and philosophy. Wrote a
This is
paper.
direct correlation.
Wrote a paper about which I now remember nothing.
Would you have been in history?
Called the Slavophile Vision and the Myth of the Eternal Return.
Would you have been a history major had it not been for your interest in tradition?
Yes.
Was the Civil War interest in all?
Civil War buff as a kid, and I
Oh,
was
I see.
definitely a history freak.
Right along here with the American studies.
Which is part of the reason I got into music. I mean, that's the thing that struck me about Frank Warner's performance. He was talking about actual American people who I thought, as a suburban kid, did not exist. So. But the performing part came. Got out of college and I taught school for a year. I eventually left because I was going to be drafted anyway. And, hard to know if the war had not been there and I had just gone into a teaching job, I might have stayed there forever. But I didn't.
He's shaking there for the radio audience. He was shaking.
Horrified at the idea of being there for teaching middle school for 25 years.
In Long Island?
Gag.
Oh, it was a private school. I mean, he may have stayed at private
It's a
school.
good school, but yeah, my father was horrified at the idea of music at all. My father, who has very bad hearing, could hear me play banjo with a rag stuffed in the back of it. He was 3 floors away. He could hear the thing rushing down to the back of the basement to get me to stop because he couldn't sleep, he couldn't hear anything else, but he could hear me when I was playing banjo.
What was the first stuff you played?
First stuff I played?
Yeah.
Well, I just like every other banjo player. I had no idea how to play the thing. Didn't know anybody who knew how to play the banjo. So I learned everything except Jeff's brother, who wasn't terribly good at it.
But he was learning from, my brother was learning from Billy Fair, who was real good at it. He was inventive, Billy was trying, but he had taught my brother Fralin.
Mostly I learned from Pete Seeger's book. And then as I started hearing a lot of traditional banjo styles, then I started figuring it out for myself.
You said that earlier that you started writing, stopped writing. Why don't you talk a little bit about that development?
Well, I co-wrote one pretty good song. I wrote some others that were okay, and I suppose I even played at some rock clubs. That's one time opening act for Robert Klein one time, and things like that. And it was pretty bad. I mean, there was something about songwriting that was so utterly depressing.
Talking about the early 70s now? Is this was
69.
69?
Because I have a tape, someday I'll release it. I have a tape, a full hour, I think, of Jeff Davis.
Jeff Davis concert.
At the Mormon church, I'll have to buy up all of the copies.
Jeff Davis, singer-songwriter.
Pretty morose stuff. Moody and bleak and dark.
Well, Jeff is a very moody, dark, bleak person who once said to me, the only reason I don't commit suicide is because I'm too interested in what's going to happen next.
Did I say that? So, it didn't do me any good. Nothing therapeutic about it. And it wasn't interesting to me. I am not interesting to me. So I found Roscoe Holcomb and Frank Prophet and Almeda Riddle and very, very interesting. It was much more interesting singing their music and talking to people about them. And so I was devoted to that music, and it felt natural to me to do that. Songwriting. Part of my, too strong a word here, but a word along the lines of revulsion about songwriters is that I don't care about hearing about their lives any more than I cared about hearing mine.
And when you hear a good song that's written, it really stands out for some reason, and it does stand out from the pack. And Bob Franke has a way of putting perspective on things when he writes that has a universality about it.
I'm just thinking of an album title that my friend Randy Pitts and I invented at the conference.
Pitts.
Pitts.
I tried to think of his
Remember that,
name
right?
all last night.
Oh,
really?
I couldn't get to Pitts. Couldn't get there.
We were just planning for imaginary album titles for one of the Pokey Ducks there. Who I won't name because there's no reason to, and we decided that Songs of Personal Indulgence would be our album.
Whoa! Well, that's right. That's the way Jeff feels about his own songwriting. I think a lot of it was good, but he felt it was more self-indulgent. I think it was the cult of I, and it was probably too fearsome for him to be in there at that time. It was just not healthy for him. I mean, he found it as a release in the same way all of us did. When we hear traditional music sometimes, we get pulled right back, reminded about why we love the old stuff.
Jeff, as you developed this love for the music on your own, how did you feel? Was there some magic in meeting some of these guys that your father found to you? How did that make you feel when you met a Frank Prophet or Roscoe Holcomb or something?
I can't remember when I kind of stood in awe, but there came a time when I did, and I think it was pretty young.
Which your awe probably grew as you got older. I mean, you took
Yes.
Gene Ritchie and Alan Lomax and all the people entirely for granted. They're just friends of the family.
But you mean real rural people.
Sure. Oh,
As
yeah.
opposed
Yeah,
to
I don't mean Alan
Lomax.
Lomax. I don't mean Alan Lomax or Gene Ritchie for that matter, who was a folk revival star, frankly.
You mean the Horton Barkers?
Yeah.
A real reverence for what they might have to teach.
Maybe have some insight into that. Maybe you do too, Jeff. I don't know. Did you know many of these folks as well, rural people?
Well, I met some that fit through the family and have done some collecting as well. Not extensively the way something like Mike Seeger has, but I met a lot. Yeah, people would come through, and I met the Warner's friends.
Was it the same for you? I mean, did you reach a point where you felt at all something?
Oh yes. Oh well, the traditional musicians. I'm not sure that awe. I was
No, it's not a great
awed.
word.
Well,
I was definitely awed by the Alan Lomaxes and by that crowd because they were names that I came to pretty late. I'm not sure you consider 17 being pretty late, but they're not people in my family, and all I knew was Alan Lomax. And suddenly going over there and saying, well, why don't you come over on Saturday? Alan Lomax is coming for dinner. So, dinner. Alan Lomax. Where's for Jeff? Yeah, I was definitely awed of that crowd. In fact, I can remember, for example, meeting Frank Prophet. I'm not sure that awe was the word. It was more like I guess I was a little awed because he was something of a star to me by the time I met him. Another world of stardom. But he was definitely a North Carolina farmer. It was not an awe-inspiring person. He was a very, very down-to-earth person who sat there and talked to me on that front porch on that hot summer night for a long time and sang some songs. It was his completely unpretentiously normal. That was the most awe-inspiring.
I don't know how. I'm having a hard time getting at it. It's just whenever you meet somebody who carries with them as part of themselves that which you've been spending your life doing, then you're going to have a certain reverence for it.
maybe the flip side of this, and something I'm real curious about and haven't been able to get as much reaction as I'd like to get. I've wondered a lot as we've been developing this movie. What were the thoughts, and I'm sure they were varied, but what did some of these people who were discovered by John Cohen or Mike Seeger, who went out and found them, and they said, come up to Chicago, there's a festival I want to play at, or come up to Gertie's Folk City, there's people there that want to hear you. What in the world did these tradition bearers, who were turned into, I don't know, hip objects to some degree, what did they think of this? Any insight? Did you ever have any insight? Did you feel you had any insight?
I'm
into
sure I
what
do.
now?
Whether I can analyze that to make it an interesting 30 seconds, I don't know.
You have a connection with what I'm asking? What
I
I'm saying?
sure do. I think of what was Tink Tillett's? Cliff Tillett, who was my father's age, but the son of one of their informants. Tink Tillett was born in 1870 and died in 1940. He was on the Outer Banks. And his son and his son's wife became close personal friends of ours. And Jeff and I went to visit them in the 70s, too, so there was a nice continuation there. And he was in the Coast Guard during the war, Second War Station. And he said he was in New York once, and it looked like everybody was 15 minutes late. There was N.C., is that his name? I'm getting N.C. Wyatt in my brain, but
N.A.?
N.A., yeah. N.A. Hicks. Ooh, upon hearing, you guys are sick, aren't you? Jesus.
Yeah.
We're over it. We're not going to get it.
I'm more over it than her. but
No,
we're,
but I'm all in about it.
I'm convinced I got it at the conference, because I came back on Sunday, and by Monday noon, I remember exactly where I was. I was getting real sick. And unlike Doreen, I didn't go to a doctor or get any penicillin, and it took me 2 weeks to shake it.
You're right, because I got the flu in Philadelphia. I was desperate after that. I think those things do carry. Like
You're in this
dancers.
room,
Yeah.
and all the air, with 100 people, and you're there constantly, and the air's
Well, I
going
got it,
around.
and I didn't want to be sick for 2 weeks, so I forgot to go.
But it wasn't just a cold.
No, it's not.
N.A.
And
There
it
you go.
said,
That's his name, by the way, N.A.
I think you know what it was. It was that he was also Nathan.
Oh,
But to
I see.
differentiate between his father or his uncle or whatever that was.
Oh, so he's actually
May have been, but
given
he's
the name Nathan, I see.
known as N.A. My father told him about New York and all the people there and his reaction was, wow. I reckon if that many folks took out after you, they sure catch you. Brings it to human perspective.
But sense of those people going to the big city and performing.
For people totally alien to their lives,
Yeah.
totally unconnected to their lives.
Well, I-
University of Chicago or
I have-
Berkeley or
Some
Or
perspective
NYU
on
kids.
that. Some perspective on that, because over the last, 2 summers ago, several years ago, we met at a festival. I met a Nova Scotia singer named Fred Redmond, who was possibly the last of the old Nova Scotia singers. He worked independently on various things. So most of his career as a blaster for the Nova Scotia Highway Department, whatever it was called. But he'd been in Wainer and all sorts of things. And atypical, that he wasn't very well schooled, but he was extremely well read, and a remarkable librarian, a very inquisitive mind, and when he met somebody, he would ask a lot of questions, and so he found himself working at one time with Bosnian workers in Nova Scotia, and so he went to the library and read all kinds of stuff on Yugoslavia, so that he was 75 and all this Yugoslavia stuff hit, and we were all standing around wondering where the hell is Bosnia, what the hell is Serbia, what's the thing. And he'd say, well, yes, and he sat there and told us all the different places in the capital of each one, and who were the French that supported the Croatians, and, so he was a very well-read person, and had done a lot of traveling. But there he was suddenly in the United States, or up on stage in Canada, suddenly singing his old songs out of context. Someone said house parties or in his kitchen. Suddenly there he was in a giant stage. And he loved it. He loved the acclaim. He loved being on the stage. He was very aware that the people he was singing to were different than he was, and lived different lives and different culture and all those things. But he really enjoyed being there. And he enjoyed seeing new worlds and meeting new people and going to new places. And he loved getting home, get off his good clothes and go back to the bar. I didn't have any illusions of
A lot of these
fame.
people were extraordinary people in their home communities. I think of Bessie Jones, a black singer from Sea Islands. I bet she was an extraordinary person there. I bet Roscoe Holcomb, I don't think, ever got over his nervousness. Wasn't he a John Cohen person that John Cohen brought out and around?
Yeah.
And he...
61 or so, John.
Yeah, I mean, he was, I think John said he was a real complainer all the time and always worried about it, sort of a hypochondriac. But these people probably had a dynamism, a performance, even if it was in the kitchen, that conveyed. But I think Frank Prophet was extremely nervous. My father, who brought him to the University of Chicago Festival, had to get the guys to turn on all the lights on the stage so he couldn't see the audience.
Every single spot lit them.
And to walk out with him, sit down with him, and conduct a kitchen interview. It was a great thought. I could just see Mother was so good at that. Just conduct an interview to let him speak and get into the flow of it. And then he had a couple of years where he was. So let's get back to your question. Is that it? How
Well,
these
it
people
is
must
to a
have
degree,
felt.
and I wonder. What I want to do, Doreen and I have talked about this, and we've looked for names. Archie told us to talk to Glenn Orland, the cowboy singer, who
Yes.
is
His
fine. But I would like to find and talk to. One of the things that I'm thinking we should do is find someone who's willing to put them on camera and put them in the movie. To
I'll
talk
tell you
their
about Doc
feelings
Watson,
and
because
do
there's Doc going from all the way to all the way.
Yeah, well, I've got Doc Watson forms a part of my next question. What do you mean by all the way to all the way?
All the way rural
Uh-huh.
to all the way famous.
Well, but
Right.
he had played in bands. He had been in bluegrass bands and country bands and roadhouses.
And
He was a
and
performer.
Doc Watson, I think, is probably a bad choice for me to do that
Okay.
because he's become too practiced. He became a professional folk revival star. And he transcended the folk revival and just became a plain old star. I
Dewey
think.
Valfa. I think that Ralph Rensler
Well,
brought
yeah.
in '63 to the Newport Festival. You can credit Ralph and Dewey with the revival of
Right.
interest in.
And Ralph told us
music.
some interesting stories about Dewey. We talked to him, and he told us how they were very. Dewey's community or friends urged him not to go to play at Newport. He said that they're going to laugh at you, they're going to make fun of you, but Dewey wanted to go.
Well,
And,
see, there's that extraordinary
yeah.
personality.
Whereas the community, your peers are saying, don't go, don't go.
Yeah, there's no question that Fred Redden was an extraordinary person.
That's right.
And part of it, well, the way it evidence is that they were so interested in their own place where they lived that they went to extraordinary efforts to learn the music. In Fred's case, he liked to get up in front and sing in front of people. And when he stood up to sing, he would always stand. So there was a sense of performing, and he would fold his hand in front of him, and he would sing the song. He was definitely performing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he had gone out of his way to learn these old songs and didn't know anything else. He definitely sung some of his preserving something. He knew he was one of the last. And he would have been a great person to come to.
But any ideas of that, people who are acceptable. Glenn is one who Archie thinks would be great because he says he's a great philosopher and talker, but never became a star and really gives him out of his tradition. Archie, no, I don't know.
Been
If he
doing it
would.
so long.
He really has been.
I wonder whether he's a good choice either
Yeah.
because he's been doing it so long. I'm trying to think of someone who has been not really a
Doug Wallen.
Doug Wallen. Now there's hard to know what he talked about.
See,
What he
he's
could
such
learn.
his personality. His personality is non-performing. And
He's in North Carolina Ballad Center.
he's just got a national heritage program. But he's come out and done work in North Carolina, and George Holt has worked with him. I had high hopes of being able to be part of that, and it didn't happen because I really loved his music.
Maybe the thing you do or we do is just you get two different perspectives. Somebody who would love it and really shined and really thought it was great, and somebody who didn't. Norm Cohen. Did you see?
Etta Baker is another one because she couldn't go out and perform because her father and her husband didn't want her to. It wasn't interesting.
That's interesting.
You know that name?
I know the name. That's all.
She recorded in 58.
Black Western people. Black
Sure.
Western North Carolina.
Yeah, a wonderful guitar player.
Norm Cohen has a story that he wrote in the little booklet that he did that accompanied the Smithsonian 4 CD
Revival
collection.
of-
Yeah.
Right.
American Folk Revival or something. I don't know what it's called. In any event, he tells a story in the booklet about somebody. He might have named the musician. I don't recall. I've got it after him, who lambasted the audience from stage. This particular fellow was having a bad day, or was just generally cantankerous. But I think it was at Berkeley, and he just told the kids in the audience that they don't know what they're applauding. They're applauding him because he's old and he's playing a banjo or a fiddle or whatever he was playing, and that's that. And that's that. They don't know. They don't even know what they're listening to. One of these.
Might I say that that's usually what's happening on stage?
Well, I would.
People are applauding and cheering and
I
standing
have
up,
to
they don't know
laugh
what's
because
going
I've
on.
probably been to 50 rock concerts where people applaud the tunings. It happens at Grateful Dead concerts all the time.
What happens in that relationship between audience and stage is something that is way beyond me.
But
But
this is a traditional performer.
Yeah,
Yes.
see, and I think in this
Performer.
context, there's a whole other element going on. You are Norm is talking about a folk festival in the early '60s where the audience, who has no connection with the tradition, is primed to hear the old tradition bearer. The guy probably had it right when he said, "You just like me because I'm old." They probably wanted an old guy more than they wanted a young guy.
Yeah, it's sentimentality.
Yeah.
Probably. It's noble savage to some
Yeah.
extent. These people are better than we are because they're pure, and wow, isn't this cool?
Yeah.
Acoustic guitars and
It's
the other.
cultish.
Yeah, yeah.
But also the music is exotic.
Yeah, exactly. And then I said the flip side, your comment about Doc Watson reminded me of something else that Ralph Rinzler told us, which I'll get to in a minute. But the question I want to ask is, do either of you think that the folk revival, the commercial folk revival, played any role in feeding music back to the tradition bearers, expanding their own repertoires, making them look within their own traditions and find stuff that they didn't know, so that they could have a new bag of tricks, a new repertoire for these festival stages or new audiences?
You know the jokes about the collector coming through and the people sitting in Tobacco Road there with their shacks and get out the Lomax book, Maud, here comes the collectors again.
I didn't hear that.
Right. So, and I can't think of the Froggy Spring. Larry Older, who's a lumberman from Saratoga, who definitely looked into collections because he realized that it's a currency for the music. Frank Prophet, on my father's encouragement, went back and looked at his songs. His son has consciously studied the songs to sing professionally. What do you think about that?
Fred Redman, who was Nova Scotia, he only really had about a year and a half of public before he was killed. He was not interested in developing his repertoire. He was just fascinated that there were people out there in the world like Norman Kennedy, Scottish singer, who knew versions of these songs, who knew complete versions of the song that Fred only remembered one or two verses. So he couldn't wait to get his hands on the Norman Kennedy to fill in those songs that he just barely remembered. And I was so excited about hearing other people who knew this stuff. I just couldn't believe it that there were still people out there in the world who sang these old songs. And not to mention the other side of it, that there was an audience that wanted to listen to these old songs. Did he imagine that the audience knew anything about it? I don't think he cared. I don't think it was interesting. I sat with him when watching John Hammond Jr. play and a bunch of bands, and what Fred usually did in those situations when he had no connection at all was just what wasn't there. He would lean over in the middle of the concert and start to, did I sing you that song? And then he gets right up close to you and he starts singing this little song. Meanwhile, there's the band blasting on the audience, and Fred is singing this little song. And so they had a narrow, I think a traditional musician has a narrow sense of what music is. It's what they know and what they've heard, and the rest of it is noise, and in a way that we don't quite understand. We've heard so much of such a variety. We make music out of all these things. They don't.
I think particularly at a time, we're talking 30 years ago, we have mass media. Well,
Let's say.
Well, but mass exposure to that kind of stuff.
But also,
tape recorders. Really.
yeah, I mean, we didn't have, there was no way people could hear even other people's stuff. You know, you heard what was in, by and large, what was in your community at the time.
Well, the Ralph Rinzler story about Doc Watson, which I thought was such a interesting story, was that found Doc Watson, and I don't remember who he told me introduced him to Doc, but it was somebody else he'd gone down to see, and a name he'd know. I can't recall who it was. And, said Ralph was asking, do you know any other guitar players here? He said, well, you should hear Doc. And Doc was playing rockabilly. He was playing electric rockabilly. He was having a lot of fun playing with his friends and playing. And Ralph claims to have asked him, do you know any acoustic songs? And do you know, and then given him songs. And I found it kind of fascinating that he was then brought to places like New York City and Newport and presented as this traditional acoustic singer, and the stuff was given to him by a New York City folklorist.
So you think that a lot of that has to do with whether Doc's repertoire is imposed by Ralph Rinzler?
Yeah, that's what yeah, exactly.
So you think he learned Omi Wise and that sort of stuff?
Well, I wonder where obviously as he started, obviously.
Bionic folk singer.
Obviously,
Created by the
obviously he took an
Washington,
interest in the
DC.
music and had sources of his own.
Well, my
I'm
friend
wondering
was,
if-
was very traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he grew up with it. I mean, he knew Tom Ashley. And people on the old time music, Tom Ashley's, whatever the set is called, Clarence Ashley's,
Cliff,
were old.
guitar player. It's on there, the third person. Clint
Howard.
Howard.
I think that they were old friends. I think he had the music. I think he was playing rockabilly because there was money in rockabilly. Not that he didn't like it. Not that he wasn't having a good time. But Frank Prophet, after all, when he met the Warners, the stuff he cared about was Jimmy Rogers' solos.
Local music, yeah.
And
My father imposed that on him and said, look, put down the guitar and start looking for the older stuff that you need. Nowadays, folklorists won't do that because they're interested in what the snapshot, what the cultural community, what are you doing in that recording that. But these paternalistic older generation of these things, I don't want to hear that shit. Why don't you sing the older songs? That's what I'm interested in, and I think it did have an impact.
oh, because they never imagined anybody would care. And of course, guitars and all that had profound influence. In terms of getting people to put down guitar, it's really big thing, very important. So I think that yes, there were plenty of people, musicians, who would go off to a festival and hear all kinds of things that was similar to what they did, so that they could get a handle on it, feel close to it, and pick up. Frank Prophet had a developing sense of himself as a performer. Big difference between his first and second record and his third record.
It's an ongoing process. I have no doubts that black minstrel performers looked at white minstrel performers who were looking at black people performing and picked up what those white people thought the black people were doing and used the good stuff.
And of course, any old fiddle players were going around the country whenever they could go to fiddler contests. Some guy from North Carolina would be in central Kentucky for some kind of work. Got a job as a carpenter, and then somebody from central Arkansas would be at the same place at the same time, and they go to this convention and they meet each other and have different tunes and different styles and learn from each other. So it's not, they're musicians, they're not artifacts. So of course they're going to pick up on
It's more of an informational question. I'm interested in whether you know or know anybody who might be able to direct us to readings on local festivals, local concerts going back to the 20s and 30s. Books that will tell us about things I can read.
Oh,
about.
yes, you
okay.
should. Sarah, what's her the one who founded the National Folk Festival, White. Sarah something not.
the festival, White Mountain.
The White Top, White
okay.
Top, which was who did the Lincoln song? Booth shot Lincoln. Bascom Lamar Lunsford, White Top Festival in 1934, early 30s. Bascom Lamar Lunsford and Sarah Knott. I think she had a lot to do with the establishment of Woodshop too. The National Folk Festival. Those two are the earliest ones, and I think they're even in cahoots in some places. St. Louis claims the first festival on White Top, and I think that probably you can find writings about that early stuff through Joe Hickerson and Jerry Parsons.
Is anybody alive who went to Fiddler's Contest in the 20s? No.
Yeah.
Jack Langstaff was at White Top in 1940 or something like that.
There are articles in the journals of the time about it.
Yeah, just a question of getting.
But Jerry Parsons is probably the first source. I mean, he's the librarian. Joe is the archivist.
Okay.
And Jerry is his librarian.
Okay.
But I'm sure that there were reports written here and there.
Was there any conscious effort conscious effort in the workshops, the Newport festivals, to recreate a sense of the older festivals?
Not to my knowledge ever.
It was more
Even in the ballad tree, no. No.
It's just more along the lines of the commercial festivals like the jazz festival.
I don't know the answer to that because I never was part of the jazz festival.
Well-
But I do know that the little workshops were all acoustic and held out in the field. People sat around, so there was a real...
Well, they weren't all acoustic.
No,
I mean,
that
there
was
were
my
few-
memory.
few
Probably because I was
acoustic.
involved in the ballad tree with my
Right.
father, and nobody wanted to go to that much.
No, I mean, the blues and the banjo workshop, they were all, because that's why Mary Catherine Alden has it all on tape, because there were microphones and recording machines there. She has all the workshops.
So you mean that they were officially recorded
Oh, yeah.
by the Newport
Yeah,
Foundation?
that's what she has, is not only the main stage stuff, but the workshops as well. So when I went to see Colonel Rain Glover and Bucker White and Reverend Garrett Davis and
But not just Nagras that were there to record, to document it. You mean things that are amplified to the people to hear. As I remember it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think at Blues Workshop, I had several thousand people couldn't hear.
Where, from the main stage or from other places?
No, out in the workshop area, inside the stadium. I don't know if they were all amplified, but there's certainly some of them. But an attempt to create an atmosphere of the older festival, I don't know. I don't think so.
Anybody
I mean,
here?
they'd have a workshop and it would be on banjo styles or on ballads or on blues or something, and that would be about it.
They were the original.
And you would get there, whomever was invited to the festival, and they would sit around and trade songs, and occasionally play together to the extent that they could or would or felt like it, and there would be some attempt at interpretation, although not by folklorists. Essentially, they would be introduced, and then they trade songs. It was all, for me, incredibly impressive.
Who were your audiences for the last few years? You stopped doing school stuff and started performing more generally. Who comes to your shows and how do they get promoted?
We'll never, as long as we're doing this music, school programs will be part of it. Even in this trip, we made more money in school programs than we made in concerts. That is a given. The rest has to be made up of museums who want to present what you're doing in conjunction with exhibits that they'll have or outreach programs. Schools who will do evenings to introduce their community into what they have in their schools. The network of coffee houses, acoustic music venues. There's, particularly in California, a very strong tradition of house concerts, all up and down the coast.
Again, you haven't answered the question.
And the
Well,
people that
Who are our
would-
audiences?
Yeah.
You mean what's the makeup of the personality?
No, not at all. No, I think you have answered the question.
Oh, I
You
see.
answered the question. What's your answer to the
Oh,
question?
no, exactly. Anything we can get our hands on.
Okay.
Outdoor
that's-
museums, indoor museums, schools,
Libraries.
clubs, libraries, museums, all kinds of things. Concert dates to the extent that.
When you talk about the network of coffee houses, I think you're talking about, what I hear, what I know about is places that have their own mailing lists, and people that go there all the time, and so
Local,
they advertise to the people they know come, because they've taken the trouble to go there once and
and
sign
they
the
tend to
list.
be very local.
Yeah.
I mean, the place in Saratoga had some people who were there, and some friends of ours who came from relatively far away, but my sense is that most of the people who live within 15 miles of there came because it's close and easier to get to. I mean, Randy, at the conference, I think Randy Pitts was talking about the difficulty of getting people to Fred Salvage, getting audiences for traditional music to Fred Salvage. But we did a house concert in El Cerrito, and the president of the San Francisco Folk Music Club, or whatever that's called, was there. Actually, it was in Oakland. And she was saying that they don't do anything in Berkeley or San Francisco, speak of, because that's not what the audience is, suburban.
I just talked to Ray Patrick 2 weeks ago, and very similar. She said San Francisco, when she started, she got involved in folk up in San Francisco 57, and she said in the 60s, they would have 200 or 300 people that every other Friday night they'd have these gatherings. And she said now it's the suburbs. a Sunday afternoon get 150 people. There are folk clubs where she'll get 20, 30 people in the city, which I thought was really, really interesting. It's really spread out.
The
As
folk
people
revival was a white middle class.
Yes. She said she had actually, it was interesting, she made a point because I guess it was, I went to see Monday, so it was the Friday night before, a black man had come, and he was
There
a
are
young.
meetings at her house every Friday night. It's not a house concert, it's the club.
The club meets every other Friday night, they have a potluck, and they've been doing that in her house since '64. And she said that was a big thing, because that's not their demographics, it is.
Well, we were in Riverside just the other night. Bar and down there, and guy Mr. 30 black guy bought 2 tapes for us. Very excited about them. We did half a concert, and he just happened to be sitting where I could see him for the second half, which was some very nice people, singer-songwriter, mostly did some traditional music, and it was good, but he wasn't particularly, I could tell he wasn't particularly interested, but he was just apparently knocked out by what we were doing. Walked up to me practically all tremulous, that's not the word.
A tremble.
Tremble, thank you. Tremulous is what flower is. Anyway, something about it that seemed utterly exotic to him, seeing what it was that we did. We'll never know what that thing was. Yeah, it's definitely, and Asian, middle class white and Asian.
Talked to Bernice Regan once in Washington, who's the Sweet Honey in the Rock in the Smithsonian Institution. And she misinterpreted, she thought I was asking about folk dance because she knew me through my connection with CDSS. She said, Jeff, black people don't folk dance. They just dance. They don't go folk dancing.
But of course, we know that that's not true because there are.
Yeah, but I mean, in
dance
general,
groups.
the closer they are to the tradition,
Yes, they don't think.
they don't see it as something to which they have to go or
Yes.
develop or do.
Yes.
It's part of their lives.
Yeah, well, and the closer you are to the tradition, you're not going to call yourself a folk singer.
That's exactly right.
You do.
Yes.
And it's just what you do. And I found that just a curiosity in when Pete Seeger's the only person we've filmed in this thing so far. We haven't intended to film anyone when we filmed him, except he astonished us by dropping into our laps and being available for that, and we didn't want to let it go. I felt very much unready to do it when we did it, but prepared really meticulously. And
1,100,000 people you could talk to that wouldn't have to be in it, but I don't imagine any way
Yeah.
to make a film like this without.
Oh, exactly, and that's what I knew, and for a lot of reasons, not only because he's who he is in terms of what he can convey, but for marketing reasons, all sorts of reasons that are crass and noble. But he gave my first question to him, which was that I was aware that he calls himself very consciously and deliberately a singer of folk songs as opposed to a folk singer, and I knew that was a
The same way that we then call ourselves singers of traditional songs.
singers. And I knew that was something that he did, and I wanted him to and I passed that on to a number of friends of ours who know what we're doing, and there's always people curious about it, and they usually go, huh? What? So I thought that would be a good entree for Pete to talk about his work and what folk music is. But what I was thinking later, didn't pursue it on the tape, is that, okay, you're out of it. You're not a part of a tradition, per se, a folk tradition, so you call yourself a singer of folk songs. But the true person in the tradition isn't going to call himself a folk singer. So who's the folk singer?
There are any questions?
Who's the folk singer?
You should give up the color work and go into cross-examination.
These are one of these. Well, that's of course it gets silly.
Again, it's
but-
self-selected. People consider themselves to be they are. Remember Michael Cooney's definition of folk music, or what he said was, takes more than 2 trips from the car. That's not fun, is it? But that's exhausting. We're not
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.